last week, we talked about what it feels like when we as leaders get stuck. And today, we're looking at something most leaders don't recognize until it's already impacting everything around them. Dun, 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 dun. That sounds super scary, but guess what? I think all of our listeners are going to resonate with some of the things that we're talking about today. And if you do, guess what? You're in good company. Today, we're talking about the ripple effect, because underdevelopment doesn't stay contained inside of us as leaders. It spreads into team dynamics, communication, trust, culture, and eventually even into the bottom line of results. And here's the tension we have to acknowledge. The ripple effect begins subtly and is usually unnoticed at first until those ripples are impacting everything around us. Hesitation here, a shortcut there, a tone shift, a missed expectation, a leader leading from pressure instead of clarity. These are those subtle ripples that begin to work their way through our organization. And slowly the whole team begins to feel what the leader was not able to identify early on.
That's right. And I think the unfortunate truth is that most of us as leaders, we hope that our internal struggles stay personal, right? These ripples, the areas that were underdeveloped, they feel like personal struggles. And we want them to stay that way because as leaders, sometimes our biggest fear is exposing our weaknesses and kind of getting found out.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. These areas of our own underdevelopment never stay personal. They very quickly, if we play that game of wanting to ignore them, not wanting to look at those problems, wanting to, stuff them inside that closet, they always become organizational problems. They start out as personal areas of underdevelopment. They quickly become organizational problems. So today, what I want to do is unpack how our growth or our lack of ability to grow shows up on our teams, often long before we can even name what that thing is inside of ourselves. So, Eric, help us unpack this a little bit. Why does underdevelopment spread so quickly, even for those of us leaders that genuinely we're trying our best? Like we have the best intentions at heart. How does this spread so quickly past us?
Yeah, well, let's start with this. This is going to be a bit of a paradigm shift for some of us. But we have to understand that leaders define culture.
Yeah.
Leaders define culture for better and for worse.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Just like we as parents define the culture of our household. We'd like to think that we can blame our kids, our teenagers. We'd like to think that we can blame our spouse. But the reality is, if we understand that we are leaders, we have influence and impact in every environment we go, then we have to accept that we are responsible in part for shaping the environment around us.
Yes.
And a culture is caught long before it's taught.
Yeah.
It's caught long before it's taught, which means people are picking up our personal culture, our prevailing attitudes and behaviors long before they even understand what's going on. I mean, it's caught by osmosis, by proximity, right? It's why they say a bad mood spreads so quickly, right? So listen, it's important for us as listeners to remember our people are constantly watching, reading, and absorbing who we are and how we show up, right? They read our urgency, our tone, our pace, our hesitations, our limitations, our patterns. Whatever you model, you multiply. Mm-hmm. Even if you've never said a word about it, even if it's subconscious or unconscious behaviors that we're participating in, it doesn't matter. They're still present and they are still spreading. When you're underdeveloped in any area, the team doesn't just notice, they absorb that underdevelopment. Now, I just want to make sure for all of us, we remember this is not an all or nothing thing. We're all bringing wonderful qualities, superpowers to the mix, and people are absorbing those, right? But if we're not careful, our desire, like you said earlier, to not be exposed, for people to not see that we have still areas to grow in, we try to contain those deficiencies rather than to recognize, address, and transform them. What our teams inevitably absorb in our deficiencies is how they communicate, how they problem solve, how they make decisions, how they collaborate, how they handle conflict, how they respond to pressure. This is the ripple effect. Our internal deficiencies become the operating environment for everybody else. And that's why underdevelopment matters. So if we can just start by saying we need to all accept that we have areas that we're underdeveloped in.
Right.
And not necessarily by fault of our own. Sometimes it's something we haven't had the opportunity to learn and grow in, or it's a blind spot that we've just not come to recognize yet. And yet sometimes as leaders, we have to recognize there are probably areas of underdevelopment that we have resisted owning, taking responsibility for, and addressing. And this underdevelopment matters not because our drive is to be perfect. That's never going to happen. But because whatever we as leaders don't develop in, eventually our teams and the people around us have to compensate for. Yeah. And compensation always drains energy, trust, and momentum.
It's so true. And I want to add another, because this is not designed to be heaping shame on us as leaders.
Yeah, because I am feeling a little bit of shame creeping in right now. Don, save me. Throw me the life raft.
Well, let me just say, I was working with a leader this week who has built an amazing business. And yet some of these ripples are starting to show up in her team. And what she has to recognize is, hey, what got me here to this point in my growth and development is not going to sustain getting to that next mountain. It's not going to sustain what I need to continue to build and grow what I envision. And so some of our underdeveloped areas are simply a result of our own success, if you want to look at it that way, right?
Yeah.
We need to continue to develop and level up as our business develops and levels up. And if we aren't careful, if we aren't watching, if we don't take the time to address that, then again, this is another area that we'll see some of these ripples start to impact our team.
Well, let me just throw this out because I love what you're saying. I'm gonna rephrase what you said. We become victims of our own success because success will take us to a space, a place where we're at the edge of our current capacity, our abilities, our skills, our maturity, our wisdom, our insight. And that's a very scary place to be. And sometimes we're tempted to shrink back into what's familiar, comfortable, what I've already achieved. But if we can see that edge as a growth edge, an opportunity, and to recognize that we're not really victims. I mean, it's kind of a funny way to say it, but we're not really victims because being at the edge of our capacity reveals the opportunity for increased growth and development. So I just love when you said that, because when I think back on just this, our coaching business, Empower Coaching, I have numerous times we have experienced these bursts, right, of success in some new area of the business, and then all of a sudden I'm up against a new level of growth, new opportunities that require all of a sudden for me to recognize whatever helped me get the last breakthrough and level of success, that's not going to necessarily work for the next level of breakthroughs and success. And that I know that feeling of like, oh my gosh, am I ready to engage yet another growth and transformation journey? And so I just think that's really a wonderful way. That feels like a life preserver for me. That the only reason I'm at the edge of my capacity is because I've had breakthroughs, I've experienced some measure of success, and now it's time to re-engage that transformational journey.
That's right. And I wanted to draw that out because I think sometimes we can think about underdeveloped leaders as people who are just starting out on their leadership journey, or people who never invested the time and energy to do that personal development. It's like, no, any place on our leadership journey, we can encounter new areas that
That's right.
we have to grow and develop.
That's right.
This is an ongoing reality for leaders. So what I want to do is kind of break these down into common areas, Eric, that you and I see with our clients, where these ripples, these areas of underdevelopment in leaders that we work with, are starting to create some significant ripples on their team.
Yeah.
Because what I heard you saying is that if we are, it can sometimes be easier to see where this is showing up on our team than to identify where it's actually showing up in us.
Right. Yeah, I love that. And not just in our clients, but I think you would agree, Dawn, that we have to struggle through these same issues that create these ripples in our own team, our organization, and the work that we're up to. So I love that. Let's do that. Why don't we tackle them? Let's set this up for our listeners. You're going to introduce a ripple and kind of break it down a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is jump in from a coaching perspective to offer our listeners, if they're resonating with that ripple, whether it's something that they feel responsible for, the ripple, or they see it happening in their team or in their organization, at least they'll have some practical thoughts and handles on how to begin to understand and respond to those.
Right. That's right. All right. So the first ripple that we deal with, not only with our clients, but also for ourselves, is communication confusion. Now, this is what happens when we as leaders are moving fast. We're thinking out loud. We aren't clear on our expectations. Maybe we aren't even clear ourselves on what we're trying to communicate. But we assume that our team is kind of tracking with us, right? Now, how this shows up, what this looks like, look for these signs on your team. If you're having repeat questions, if there is like ongoing kind of misaligned execution, you're like, that's not what I was asking for. If you have like circular meetings where you're like, we just keep talking around the same problem, people that are just waiting on you for direction, or your team's doing a lot of rework that doesn't feel like it should be necessary. How do we, when we have leaders identify these pain points on their team, Eric, what do you talk to them about? How do you coach them through this?
So the theme of communication obviously is so big and broad that we're not going to be able to cover every facet of that, and even all of how that shows up with our clients and the organizations we work with. So I'm gonna highlight just a couple, and then if you want to highlight some as well. I think in virtually every organization that we've had the pleasure of working with over, I don't know how many, 20 years almost now, I'll point at some of the most common features of communication confusion. Number one, leaders are frustrated that their team members all seem to be operating from different playbooks. Mm-hmm. Right. So just like I often use this analogy, you can put all the best athletes in the NBA and the NFL, in the NHL and the MLB and the whatever, sport and league you follow. You can put them all on the field, the court, the ice rink, the whatever. And you can have the best, most talented, skilled players. And yet, if they are all operating from different playbooks, different offensive strategies, different defensive strategies, if they're all running different plays, it doesn't work. Right. And we've seen so many examples of, in different sports leagues, some owners able to put together the super team, and then they underperform. And there's confusion and chaos in the midst of the team. Well, that's because at the beginning of the journey, somebody forgot or failed to introduce our playbook. How are we going to run plays? How are we going to operate? What are the clear expectations? We have one of our core tools from our leadership operating system called the Radical Minimum Standard Diagram that essentially reminds leaders over and over, if you don't set clear expectations for how we show up and operate, regardless of our role and responsibility within the company, guess what? Everyone will default to whatever makes most sense to them. And so
Right.
now all of a sudden you've got everybody working from their own playbook, and that is guaranteed to create chaos and confusion. And I would follow up with one more little thing. When we're talking about radical minimum standard, really what we're talking about is how we set culture.
Mhm.
So I've often said this, the way that we can understand culture most simply is, this is how we do it. This is how we do it, right? That Montel Jordan song, that chorus, this is how we do it. I know how you do it. I know how you do it. I know how you want to do it. I know all your preference. I know how you do it outside of this space. But when we work together as a team so that we can row in the same direction, we have to clarify not only what we expect of people, but how we expect them to show up
Right.
and operate in the midst of those responsibilities. And if we don't clarify the what and the how for our teams, then they do not have a shared playbook.
Mhm.
And they will default to whatever makes most sense to them. And you will inevitably experience the ripples of chaos and confusion.
And I would add to that, if you as a leader have not slowed down long enough to be clear for yourself on the what and the how,
Yeah.
please stop expecting your team will just magically figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? That is the first work. You need to have clarity internally.
Yep.
Then the next step is okay, now I need to figure out how do I communicate this externally. But it starts with the leader.
I love that. I love that. And then just very practically, this is how we coach our clients. Set your RMS, your radical minimum standard.
Yep.
Number 2, communicate it over and over and over and over and over and over and over, just like what they say about vision. When you think you've communicated the vision of your team or your organization,
Keep doing it.
you got to do it again and again and again, because people forget, right?
Yep.
And so we have to do it over and over until it becomes the mantra of our team. And thirdly, we have to provide a regular process where we get to review and hold ourselves and each other accountable. Where are we identifying where we are operating according to our RMS, and celebrate that and look at the results, right? Because we don't want to just talk about negative ripples. There's also positive ripple effect, right? When
Yeah.
we are operating according to our playbook, there should be positive ripples. We should see beneficial, what's the right word I'm looking for? Benefits from us working in this particularly aligned way. And there has to be an ability to challenge ourselves and one another when we are out of alignment with our RMS. And I think when we just do these simple things, right? It's like my chiropractor always says, if people would just understand that if they would regularly check in and let us help them align their spine and their body, everything else gets easier. The energy flows, the blood flows. You don't deal with as many, internal issues in your digestion and in your muscles. And he said, but what do people want? They just want to absolve pain, but they don't want to do the work to sustain alignment. And so that's what we're talking about. This does require a consistent energy. But here's what I tell people. After the first few months of going to my chiropractor, where there were more significant adjustments, now I literally show up once a week. I'm in there for maybe 3 to 5 minutes. He checks in. Hey, little tweak here, little tweak there. Hey, bro, you're good to go, because you are aligned. And I have experienced radical benefits from just the constant pursuit of staying aligned with my own body and as teams when we stay aligned with our radical minimum standards.
That's right. And I think if we're not careful in life and in leadership, we can be chasing symptoms. We can be treating symptoms.
Oh, yes.
And
are you commenting on our medical system here in our country? What are you doing? Are you trying to push into a controversial
there? I don't think we want to, but we talk about all the time how medical language is so clearly applies to what we do, because when you think about somebody in your family that was maybe sick, something was going on, and they're trying to treat these one-off symptoms. This is happening over here, that's going wrong over there, and suddenly they get a diagnosis that explains all of these symptoms.
Yeah.
And instead of chasing after one-off symptoms, all of this energy being expelled chasing symptoms, they get to treat the root cause.
Yep.
That's how we look at these ripples, right? Instead of chasing after the symptoms that you're experiencing on your team, let's treat the root cause.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which starts internally with us as a leader.
So on Monday, so we're recording this here mid-December 2025, right? So our listeners will get this probably right after the new year. Happy New Year. But one of the things we do with our clients, oftentimes, during a major transition during the year, like obviously the calendar year is shifting over, we'll do some reflective exercises with our clients, right? They've been in the trenches, working hard, doing the stuff that we're talking about, fighting for an alignment around their radical minimum standards. And so we slow down to have them reflect on how's that going? Where have you seen the benefits over the past, 3, 6 months, 12 months, whatever it is. So on Monday morning, working with one of our clients that we've been working with for a couple of years now, I just asked them 2 reflective questions. I want you to share this, an executive team of a large company. And I just had two reflective questions. Number one, what's one thing you're celebrating in terms of a breakthrough, a massive win? What's going incredibly well as you look back over this last year in the company at large? And they took on a lot of new projects, and they did a big acquisition. It's just so much stuff they're dealing with. And they're also dealing in the midst of all the, political, geopolitical, social, struggles of supply chain issues and tariffs and all that kind of stuff, right? So, and then second question, identify the one area where you feel like you grew most significantly as a leader. Yeah. So they share all their breakthroughs and celebrations from the year as a company. And we process them and reflect on them, and yay. And then they share their own personal growth as leaders. And then I said, hey guys, I want to connect the dots for you. You don't get those big monumental breakthroughs as a company unless you guys are doing the work individually and as a team, because where you go, so goes the company.
Yeah.
That's the ripple effect.
That's right.
That's the ripple effect. And so I just slowed them down and said, it's your commitment to doing the work on yourselves and working well, learning to work well as a team, aligning yourselves to your radical minimum standards. So when people ask, oh, what's the benefit of this leadership operating system? I said, you don't have to reinvent the wheel on radical minimum standards. We'll just provide those for you through our operating system, right? And as they align themselves and do that work, the ripple effects, the benefits, the breakthroughs of what they've experienced, they were able to connect the dots and go, wow. And obviously that's what we need. We need to see those benefits to reward the work that we're doing internally.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we don't connect the dots. So I remember after 3 months of seeing this chiropractor, this is 2 years ago, and coming home and saying to my wife, I don't know if I'm going to keep going to chiropractor. I don't know if there's any difference. It's inconvenient. I have to go every week, blah, blah, blah. And she says, hey, babe, hold on. Let me connect some dots for you. Are you aware that in the last probably 6 weeks, you have not once complained about sciatica pain? Are you aware that you've not once complained about back pain? As a matter of fact, most evenings before, you would wake up with incredible cramps in your hamstring. You would wake up with pain in your body. And do you realize over the last 6 weeks, I cannot recall you complaining one time. Connecting those dots between the work that we do internally and the benefits is not always obvious. And so I want to encourage our listeners to really think both about the negative ripple effects and how those are potentially sourced in ourselves, but also the positive ripple effects and how those are equally sourced in ourselves.
Yeah, the opportunity that presents. Yeah.
Love it.
All right. Let's move on.
Two.
Ripple number 2, empowerment and ownership gaps. This ripple shows up when we as leaders are underdeveloped in some of our delegation and leadership areas. We give out maybe half ownership. We give out responsibilities, but not authority. We might have inconsistent expectations, whether that's across our team. We're expecting different outcomes from different team members. And when empowerment is underdeveloped in us as leaders, the initiative on our teams shrinks. So we might experience this as constant check-ins, a fear of making mistakes, decision bottlenecks, leaders doing the work that their team should be doing, or employees playing small. So when we have leaders that are communicating those pain points, Eric, what do you tell them?
Wow. Well, first of all, let's source where those ripples more often than not are coming from. And I would say two primary areas. So let me throw them out there, and then let's unpack each one and kind of dialogue on them. The first one you mentioned is when we fail to understand as leaders that we have to give the appropriate authority along with responsibility. So what I will tell people is when they're in an environment where they've been given responsibility without the commensurate authority to decide, act on, execute on that responsibility, then what happens is everything ultimately has to go back up to a bottlenecking leader, because everybody's waiting for decisions to be made. Everybody's waiting for approval. Everybody's waiting for permission. Everybody's waiting to get something signed off. And It's not to say that that's never appropriate on really massive decisions or big projects. But more often than not, we don't realize that we're asking people to take on different qualities of responsibility in our teams and our organization, but then failing to give them the necessary authority to go and make it happen. Now, does it mean that they're going to make it happen perfectly or they're always going to win? It's always going to be successful? No, but that's not the point. Nothing undermines somebody's confidence and clarity on our team more than what I've seen, more than when we give people responsibility without the appropriate authority.
So true. And when you think about, especially those people on our team that are particularly driven, results oriented, and you give them a responsibility, but then they can't make the decisions to reach the outcomes that they've been assigned to be responsible for, we are putting those team members in a very difficult position.
Yeah. 100%. I can't tell you the number of times I've worked with leaders who complain about team members only to discover that they are guilty of passing on responsibility without authority.
Right.
And ultimately what that usually reveals in us as a leader is not a lack of confidence in the individual on our team, because we wouldn't have given them responsibility in the first place. What it normally reveals in us as leaders is a fear of letting go of control, a fear that someone might do something that would reflect poorly on us as leaders, right? And this is no different than in parenting. Like, how often do we ask our kids to do something and give them responsibility, but then we kind of jump in and micromanage and overpower them or scold them. You didn't do it right. You didn't do it the way I want. And then what is that kid going to feel like? Well, I don't want to try those things again. I don't want to be responsible for that again, because I just feel like I'm going to get hammered. I feel like all I'm going to get is criticism and negativity. And so for us as leaders to really, if we are seeing these ripples in our midst, to ask the hard question, is it possible that I'm not giving the appropriate authority away with responsibility? And why would I not be doing that? Is it a fear of losing control? Is it operating out of an insecurity about our own reputation? Is it this kind of sense of, you know what, it's always better if I just do it anyway, right? And this is why there are kids in homes that are in their late teens or early 20s whose parents still do their laundry and make all their meals and, clean up after them and make their beds and schedule their events and call their professors and complain about a grade and call their bosses and say, hey,
you're
I
not
don't think you're giving my baby the right opportunity. There's a phrase that we coined in our culture called helicopter parenting.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? I have seen just as much helicopter leading in the organizations that we work with. So that's the first one. Let me throw out the second source. I think as leaders, we all know at some level that we have to delegate. So now we're talking about giving away this responsibility and authority. So some of us kind of lean in the direction of, I'm going to give you responsibility, but not really give you the authority to go do this.
Yeah, that's one gutter.
The other gutter is the people that are like, yeah, I know I need to delegate. I know I need to give away responsibility. So, but we don't delegate, we dump.
That's right. Just take it all. Here you go.
Here
Good
you
luck.
go. Have fun. Push them into the deep end. Throw them off a cliff. Hope that works. Hope the parachute works. Hey, I know it's your first time skydiving, but don't worry about it. You'll figure it out and push them out of the plane. That's what we call dumping.
Yeah.
Right. And dumping is when we give people responsibility that we have not ensured they are prepared for, have the necessary support for, have the necessary coaching for, have the necessary resource for, have the necessary follow-up for, have the necessary accountability for, have the necessary, what we would call support and challenge, developmental rails to run on, right? We just throw them into the deep end. And I think this is equally destructive. It's equally undermining of our team's performance. And again, the number of conversations I've been in with leaders that we're working with, where I say, hey, I know you're really frustrated with this individual. Okay, so what is it? And then what we find as we have the conversation is, well, I've asked them to accomplish these tasks. I've given them these projects. I've given them these responsibilities. And then I check in with them 3 months later and I find out, you know what? They've made no headway. They're not any further down the road than they should be. What? Hold on. You haven't checked in with them in 3 months? You mean you haven't followed up with them to see how they're doing? Like it's just crazy, but because of the hustle and bustle of life and work and responsibilities that we have, oftentimes we fail to realize that we need to create margin as leaders to invest appropriately in the growth and development of those around us. Because guess what? It's not going to happen magically. It's not going to happen by accident. And these are some of the cultural features within a team or organization that ultimately undermine people's confidence, that ultimately cause people to shrink back, to turn over. And so whatever gutter that we most resonate, just as our listeners are wrestling with this, just to which one do we tend to lean toward? Because most of us tend to lean toward one or the other. Right? We either lead towards the micromanaging, kind of helicopter leading, or we lean towards the dumping that we think is a form of delegation. And both gutters will leave us and our teams deeply frustrated, and obviously affects so much more than we can imagine.
Yeah. And that second gutter that you brought up is a problem that we see chronically throughout society.
Yeah.
Where what I like to say is we love to promote people to their level of incompetence because somebody was a good marketer or a good salesperson or a good communicator. And so now you've promoted them to the head of their department. And now they're leading a team of 3 or 4 people. And oddly enough, being a good marketer, those skills didn't develop that person and prepare them for leadership. Like we do this as leaders all of the time. Well, that person is competent. They're a good communicator. They're whatever. Now let's put them into a position of leadership. And I was just having this conversation with one of our leaders this week. I said, well, so this person on your team isn't meeting your expectations. You hired them in for this position and now they're leading a team. Have you invested? There's 3 ways we can invest in our people: time, energy, or money. You know, if you can't as a leader invest your own time and energy, then you need to pay somebody else to do it, right? But you have to be investing in the development of your people. You can't just throw them in the deep end and, Godspeed, good luck, hope you learn how to float real quick. I said, you have 2 choices. You either fire them now because you're not going to give them the opportunity to ever succeed.
Right.
Or you choose to invest in them. It's really simple. Those are the choices when we break it down. Or you do what many people do, this long, painful, slow death of an individual on our team because we're unwilling to either fire them or invest in them.
Yeah. I mean, there are so many stories that are running
Yeah.
through my mind right now of clients we've worked with and where they find themselves in this situation.
Yeah.
And sometimes those clients are willing to do the work of investing, whether it's them learning how to invest in their team, appropriately outsourcing that investment. Sometimes that is appropriate.
Hmm.
But very often we find that it's just like, you know what, I don't have time for that. It's just easier to turn them over.
Yeah.
And again, you and I both would agree there are times when that is the appropriate decision.
100%.
But again, parenting and leadership are not perfect parallels, but there are so many wonderful parallels, which is why my wife and I have utilized this leadership operating system that we've developed, as our parenting framework as well as any leadership framework. But when we think about our own kids and as we're trying to develop them, like, that's our responsibility. Until they're out of our house, our primary responsibility is to invest in them, to help them develop so that they become increasingly more sufficient, autonomous, capable, independent, know how to operate within, culture and society in an effective way that makes them an asset. Wonderful. How often as parents do we want to outsource that training as an excuse for us not to learn how to invest in our kids? So we do that inappropriately. Or what do? We just write them off.
Hmm.
They'll never figure it out. They're too difficult. They're obstinate. They're rebellious. They never listen. And it's like, whoa, hold on. Hold on. One of my favorite things to say to parents when they're complaining about their teenagers is I say, hey, I'm sure you don't fall into this category, but what I have discovered is that the problem is normally not with the teenager. They're just being teenagers. They're doing what they should do at this age. They're becoming independent. They're challenging. They're asking hard questions. They're making mistakes. They're trying stuff out. Some of it does work. Some of it, it's teenage years. More often than not, what I find is the parent is with the parents of teenagers who don't have a clear framework to understand what their kids are going through at this particular stage of development, and so don't know how to make the necessary investment, and so they end up in the gutters on either side.
That's right.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Ripple 3.
Well, I'm looking at time here.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I'm just wondering,
I'm having so much fun talking about this stuff that I lost track of time.
I know. We can keep going. That is my job to kind of keep us on track a little bit here.
Okay, well, let's do this.
Yeah.
Because there's no reason to rush through all this.
Mm-hmm.
We can take, some of these other ripples, throw them into the next episode.
Well,
and I'm sure our listeners wouldn't mind, us not having a 3-hour podcast. So let me just share a quick story, and then we'll move into some practical thoughts about what we can do with what we're learning today, and then call it a session. Is that okay?
I love that. Yeah.
So I'm on a call yesterday. Just for our listeners, please know that we have a high value for constantly speaking, leading, coaching out of the overflow of our real-time journey. Not something we learned 10 years ago. Yes, we do draw from that, but so this is a real-time story. I'm on a call yesterday with a person who's connected to our Empower ecosystem, right? They're kind of coming into the Empower tribe, as I like to call it, the clan, the community, the cult. No, I didn't say that. Just kidding, guys. And they're just kind of sharing their backstory of a very challenging season they've been with their business, and some stuff that's not gone right, and some tensions with them and other partners and investors, and on and on. Tells me the whole story. And as they're sharing this story,
Mm-hmm.
I'm hearing these ripples.
Yeah.
I'm hearing that the challenges, the problems, the frustrations, whether with his team, whether with his investors, with whoever. He's frustrated with all of them. But what I'm hearing is, hey, dude, you probably have some responsibility in this situation, right? And so we just gently began to point at some of these. And it was unbelievable. This guy is probably in his early 60s, has been wildly successful. So the thought of this business not working, failing, or him not participating in it in the future is obviously, man, what a shot to the ego, to the pride. But his willingness, as I just kind of said, okay, we're talking about symptoms. Let's talk about the systemic dynamics. Can I point at some things? And little by little, he began the process of, on his own, as I just kind of threw out these ideas, he would say, you know what? I don't think I realized until right now how I've been operating that would contribute to that.
Mm.
And literally for each one of these ripples, he was willing on his own to say, Eric, my gosh, you know what? I think I've been contributing to that. Oh, I didn't realize how much I was a factor in that. I didn't like whether it was moving so quickly that his team felt left behind, not communicating clear radical minimum standards or providing a clear playbook. You know, dumping instead of delegating, micromanaging on certain areas with his partners because he's got some control features, right? And so he's micromanaging, the perception of his investors and what they can be involved in and what they can ask about and what, it was just unbelievable and I told him, I said, I hope when I'm in my 60s, I am still willing to practice the quality of humility that you are and your willingness to own your part in these. I mean, you're not always 100% responsible for all these ripple effects, but his willingness to take as much responsibility as he can. I said, the work that you're doing today and that you will continue to do as you go through this, hopefully this coaching process is what's going to allow you to get the future breakthroughs. You've got so many breakthroughs. You have so much success in your life.
That's right.
Like you could hang it up now, call it a day, and nobody would argue with the success that you've experienced in life. But I said, I hope when I'm in my 60s, I'm still as passionate to grow, to develop, to be transformed, to learn, to become even more of an asset to the people and the projects that I'm invested in. Anyways, it was such a wonderful conversation because the hardest thing is not just identifying the ripples, but our willingness to own our contribution to those negative ripple effects.
As we talked about in our last episode, being willing to look those things in the face a little bit, just stare at it for a minute and be like, oh, okay, that's on me. That's something I need to at least spend some time with.
I love that. All right, let's talk just some practical handles for our listeners. Here's some things I want us to encourage us to reflect on this week. I want us to think about what's one ripple in our midst that we can resonate with, identify. Maybe it's something we've shared. Maybe it's something else that you've identified as our listeners. Maybe it's in the area of communication gaps or how we're showing up our emotional tone and our mood. Maybe it's initiative or lack of initiative. Maybe it's, some cultural feature. Maybe it's something, results oriented, performance oriented. Either way, I want to encourage our listeners to ask these two simple questions. Number one, what part of my leadership may be contributing to this ripple effect?
Yeah.
Number two, what's one small shift I could make today or this week that would potentially change a negative ripple into a positive ripple? Because as leaders, we define culture, whether we like it or not. And so it does no good to kind of hide our head in the sand and pretend like things are going to magically get better. But the moment that we as leaders choose to practice these things, identify a ripple, hey, where am I potentially contributing to this? And what needs to change? And if we're able to have that conversation either internally or with somebody else, and we're able to do it and fend off the voices of shame and guilt and pride that kind of, it's never your fault, whatever those, like if we can fend off those internal voices and just stay on the path of personal responsibility. I tell people it's never all our fault.
That's right.
But the change that we're looking for out there has to begin in here. It has to begin with us.
Yeah.
And so this is the best thing we can do is own our authority and power to shape culture, to take responsibility for the ripples that we are having, whether we're aware of them or not, and choosing to make the necessary changes at a personal level that will impact the team, the organization, and even larger.
That's right. Because the thing that I hope people are picking up from this conversation is we don't correct these ripples by fixing our team. We have to correct them by adjusting the source, which is us as leaders. And leadership development becomes team development every single time.
Yeah, love that.
So if this episode connected something for you, if you started to recognize some ripples on your own team, we'd love if you share this with another leader who might need the same clarity. Also, if you're listening on Apple and you could drop us a review, it would mean the world to us. We have like
well, let's be
2,000.
honest. We've got like thousands
I was just gonna
of
say,
reviews
yeah,
on Spotify, but for
yes,
some reason, and I've heard it's because it's maybe a little more difficult, maybe some extra steps on the Apple platform. But to our faithful listeners, if you value this, I don't want to say this, but it's not totally free. You got to spend the time to listen to this podcast, but we're not charging anything. Do us a favor, get on Apple, leave us a review. And we don't care what kind of review it is. Be honest, be authentic, but we'd love for people who come to Apple to see whether people are listening to this podcast and whether it's worth them giving a listen to. So if you think it's worth listening to, please leave us an Apple review.
that's right. And if you want to go deeper, join us for our next Empower Masterclass. We created these as a way to help you build the tools, the clarity, and the internal capacity that can shape a healthy culture around you. So hop on the next one. Just go to mpwrcoaching.com/masterclass. We do them every month, or click the link in the show notes.
Love it. Next week, we're going to continue in this series on the cost of underdeveloped leadership. We're going to talk about what it looks like to turn the corner, how to mitigate against these leadership gaps, and how we can grow under pressure and rebuild momentum in real time. Listeners, remember, leadership is an on-the-job training reality. We have to learn on the job. There's no other way to do it, right? And so we love that you're on this journey with us. We're grateful to partner with you. And we hope that something that we've shared today empowers you, makes you feel more clear and confident as you continue your on-the-job training. See you next time.